You guys kept asking me to try the latest Swarm 3.2 pack because it gets compared with DWG a lot. I own this car and I've drifted it on a real track, so I have a pretty clear idea of how a 350Z should behave. I'm starting with the DWG as a baseline, then I'll switch over to the Swarm. I'm starting with the DWG because this is already the closest Assetto Corsa 350Z I've driven to my own car. I want to establish that feeling first, then switch over to Swarm and see where their behavior starts to separate. This already feels familiar. The Z has always been a pretty tail-happy car, and the DWG version doesn't need much encouragement to get it to start rotating. Once I shift the weight and get back on the throttle, the rear comes around naturally without making the front feel disconnected from the rest of the car. What I recognize here is how active the rear stays through the corner. It never feels completely planted, so I'm constantly managing the angle with small throttle changes. If I push too hard, the line starts opening up gradually. I can feel that happening early enough to make an adjustment instead of suddenly losing the car. My real Z behaves in a similar way. Once the rear starts moving, the car wants to keep rotating. I'm usually controlling that movement rather than fighting to create it. DWG captures that balance pretty well. The transitions also feel natural. The steering comes back with some speed, but the car doesn't pull itself straight. There's a moment where the weight is crossing through the chassis, and I have to catch the wheel before committing to the other direction. That little delay feels very recognizable from the real car. Now, I'm not saying every part of this car is a perfect recreation of my own setup, but the basic personality is here. It rotates easily and the rear stays active, while the transitions give me enough time to react to the weight transfer. This is the baseline I'm comparing with Swarm. Real quick, before switching over, I changed the Swarm setup. The default car is turbocharged, so I matched the power and gearing more closely with the DWG. Both cars use welded diffs, and I raised Swarm's tire pressures after finding it noticeably grippier. The first thing I noticed with Swarm is how glued the car feels. There's noticeably more grip underneath it, especially through the rear. I can lean on the throttle harder without the car immediately opening up the line, and that gives it a really stable feeling. I can already understand why people enjoy driving these cars online. Raising the tire pressure helped me free up the rear, but it didn't completely change the balance. The car still carries more grip than I expect from a naturally aspirated Z at this power level. I can be more aggressive with the throttle, and it still takes more effort to get the rear moving freely compared with DWG. The more noticeable difference appears when the car rotates on entry. Swarm has a tendency to push through the front more than I expect. If I don't create enough rotation, the front starts running wide and I end up waiting for the rear to follow. That's not really how I remember my own car behaving. With my real Z, the rear usually feels more eager to come around than the front feels eager to understeer. I'm thinking about how to avoid that front end push before I can settle into the slide. The car is still predictable, but I'm driving around its grip rather than managing a naturally loose rear. I also keep noticing how quickly the steering returns during transitions. The wheel wants to come back toward the center faster, and the chassis seems to settle right away. My real car stays in that weight transfer phase a little longer. It just feels more planted and faster to settle than the Z I know from driving in real life. I wouldn't call the Swarm 350Z unrealistic. The physics feel right, and I understand why the pack is so popular, especially for online drifting. But when I compare these two to the car I actually own and have drifted on a track, DWG captures its behavior more accurately. Swarm feels like a convincing drift car, but DWG feels more like a 350Z. I'll catch you on the next run.
Peace.